Now you can see this kite is already constructed and laid out here on the cutting mat. I did something different with this, something I've never done before, and maybe you have, and it's not new to you, but it certainly is new to me. When I make a kite, and I often use a glass top as a work surface because it's so smooth and hard that you can lay out the material very smooth on it with just a very, very light misting of water on the glass itself, and that'll just bond the sail material, well, most sail materials at least, to the glass very flat, which is nice to work with. Now, when I do that, I end up hot cutting around the perimeter of the kite because the glass just dulls the knife. If I use a knife like a X-Acto knife or a utility knife or a scalpel or whatever I use. So I hot cut it, but I don't like hot cutting because it creates fumes that are really toxic. No matter what the material is you're cutting with a hot cutter, the fumes are not healthy to breathe. So I decided I would use a mat and spray it with water and lay out the sail material, which in this case is a polyfilm, and then just cut it out with a knife. Well, when I did that, I smoothed out the sail on top of the real light spray of water that I put on the mat here. And I noticed that many of the very deep cuts in the mat that haven't healed themselves have a tendency to show up on the sail when I smooth it out, which I don't really care. I don't think that'll show in the finished kite, but it's interesting to see that it does that. So I made the kite, and I use my technique of putting down the sail material, putting the bow in, gluing it down, letting it dry, putting in the spine and the battens. And in this one, I used a piece of 0.02 diameter carbon fiber rod that I glued right to the very edge of the nose, leading edge area on both sides. Now, when I did all this, the sail material was all over the mat, and I had just drawn the different lines that I wanted to follow with the nose and so on. And I just cut it out. And I'm going to remove it from the mat and find out what it looks like when it's finished, because this is all wet here still, and the sail is also wet, as you can see. And you can see some of the cross markings that are on there from the cuts and other aberrations in the mat itself that transferred to here, at least when it's wet. So I'm eager to see when it dries what it looks like. And I can see here that I made a little error in my cutting. I didn't cut close enough to the edge. I don't hem the sail material around the bow or around this leading edge carbon fiber. I don't do that. I use T8000 glue and glue it. And the T8000 is a contact-like cement that's quite good at bonding carbon to polyfilm and other materials. And one nice quality about it is that it doesn't smell very, not a lot of stink to it. And it remains relatively flexible after it dries. So that in a kite, when you're changing the shape of the kite through the wind or by bending the spine or whatever that case might be, it isn't brittle like some glues, like super glue. Some versions of super glue are quite brittle and can be unbonded from shock or some kind of a nasty change in the material itself. It'll unbond the glue, it'll just break free. And that doesn't happen, or hasn't happened, with any of the kites I've made using T8000 glue. So I guess this was a success. I think that the kite looks good, and cutting it with a knife was really nice. I didn't have to worry about smelling the toxic fumes. The one thing about knife cutting and when using polyfilm is that when you begin a cut, you have to make it one long, straight, smooth movement. You cannot stop and then restart, and then restart, and then restart. Each time you do that, even though you don't see it, it can leave a very, very tiny nick in the edge that you cut. And I will guarantee if that happens, when you fly the kite, one of those nicks will just tear right across the entire sail and ruin your kite. So you don't want to do that. And once I get this finished with the bridle and the tension line for the spine so I can bend it, I'll let you know how it works. And if this method seems to be as good as using glass, which right now I think it is,